we've got a wild one. Because you've got a pro-life MAGA Congresswoman doing an interview saying that pregnancy complications nearly killed her, and then asked the reporter not to air it. With this whole controversy surrounding Florida Representative Cammack, right, who also co-chairs the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus and has supported legislation restricting abortion. And while she does support exceptions for cases of rape, incest, and if the mother's life is in danger, a lot of the laws, they don't do enough to actually protect women in those scenarios. And this week, while she was on the Tara Palmeri show, she discussed having a life-threatening ectopic pregnancy herself back in 2024 when she was 5 weeks along with no heartbeat found. And notably, it happened shortly after Florida's 6-week abortion ban took effect. And she says that she was given two options: either a surgery where she would risk losing her uterus, or take a shot of a cancer drug, which would stop the embryo from growing. But when she was then taken to the emergency room for the shot, she said that the doctors hesitated.
And I'm like, oh boy. And that started me down a path of really understanding how broken, one, the system is, and two, how politics has really, really endangered a lot of women's lives. The nurse who was taking care of us, she was, very kind. And she said, listen, there's going to be a bit of a delay. There's some stuff that admin has to figure out. And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, according to the law, if we give you a shot of methotrexate, we are going to be held liable. And the doctor is very concerned.
With the nurse apparently pointing to an ad on her phone that said that any healthcare worker who helps a patient with a miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy could go to jail. And you had Cammack claiming that the ad was made by pro-abortion groups to create fears about Florida's abortion law. And she said she tried to read the law itself to the nurses to prove that she could get care, but...
And they said, we understand, but we've got to do some checking before we do anything. And I'm like, if I bleed out, like how long? I asked my husband, like, please Google, how long does it take to die if you have internal bleeding? It was very clear in that moment that whether you're pro-life or you're pro-choice, the politics around this issue are hurting women.
With a really, placing the blame on the politics around the law for the confusion in her care, not the law itself. And you also had her at one point kind of rejecting the idea that pregnancy is unsafe in Florida.
I will say, after hearing your story, it would terrify me to have a child in Florida. I hate to say it.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't.
But the thing is, many have noted that parts of Florida's law are vague, right? Regulators in the state say that ectopic pregnancies are exempt from restrictions and don't count as abortions, but the law also didn't define what an ectopic pregnancy is. So doctors don't have clear guidance on where they can intervene. And when the penalty for something where you're unsure is an end to your career and felony charges, they're not trying to be political when they navigate these gray areas. These are professionals that are trying to protect themselves. But also with this, what you had was Cammack's situation only making her more steadfast in her pro-birth beliefs.
Protecting life it is the realest issue for me. And I think that situation and the birth of my daughter definitely has made me more of an advocate for life.
Now, with all this, while I understand that it is blowing up now, it should be noted that this is not actually the first time she's told this story. Or she actually told it to the Wall Street Journal a year ago, and again, not blaming the Florida law, but instead left-wing rhetoric about it. You ever saying that after telling this story, she and her family faced threats. And so after speaking with Tara Palmeri, Cammack asked her not to air that part of the conversation, or with it being around 20 minutes out of an hour-long interview, and Cammack didn't ask to cut it until after it happened. And so put Palmeri into this kind of journalistic pickle.
She said she feared renewed backlash and concerns for her family's safety. She has discussed this experience, though, publicly before, and the interview was conducted on the record without any conditions on the topics we could discuss. I thought really carefully about her request. As a journalist, I often deal with sensitive subjects, and I take it very seriously to protect vulnerable sources when appropriate. But Congressman Cammack is a public official discussing a matter that relates directly to one of the most consequential policy debates in the country.
So she ultimately decided that their conversation was in the public interest and opted to air it in full despite Cammack's request. And so now what you're saying is that this story has kind of two sets of backlash. One around Cammack and her pro-birth beliefs, and one around the journalistic ethics of airing this conversation. And when it comes to Cammack, some wrote she almost died and still can't see that her politics are deadly, as well as her party has terrorized women across this country, she is complicit, and how many other forced birther electeds have similar stories. Or with many saying she's essentially one of these people that says every abortion is immoral, but my own. So there, you had Cammack saying that the procedure she had is not considered an abortion. You then also had people out there defending Palmeri's choice to air the story, saying she was on the record and it's not Tara's fault. Cammack has to hide her real story from Republican colleagues who keep supporting laws that endanger women. You had a representative from Pennsylvania calling it a powerful interview. But then you also have people out there that are slamming her, accusing Palmeri of exploiting a woman's most difficult and heartbreaking moments, saying conservative lawmakers should not even go on these kinds of shows and that journalists can't be trusted. Though again, Palmeri defended defended her choice to air it, writing it wasn't new information, she had spoken publicly about it, there were news stories, but hearing her tell the story herself moved me. And adding what struck me most was that we came away from the same story with very different conclusions. Cammack believes the problem was misinformation. In her view, activists and advocacy groups had created fear where none should have existed. And adding, I saw a law that created the conditions for that fear to flourish. Because if the law was so clear, why was there confusion at all? And then with all this, one of the things that's interesting to me is I don't know if this story really would have gone anywhere if it just went out with no request to remove that segment. Because now there's so much commentary around it, there's debate around it, you're getting clips everywhere. But like the interview itself on YouTube, it has 7.6 thousand views. And so one of the biggest things that stands out to me isn't just, the morality debate and hypocrisy debate that's happening, but again, the Streisand effect.